Hello everybody, welcome back to the Overlap Breakdown podcast. I'm joined this week as always by my good friend Umir, who's a professional analyst and scout in football, and we're going to be covering all the big talking points from the weekend's action. But first of all, how have you been doing? You've been okay? Good weekend?
Good. Yeah, busy as always. I feel like this is my spiel. I say busy as always.
Yeah.
So let's get into the football.
Let's get into the football.
There's a game that we both previewed.
Yeah.
By the way, the reception on that, really nice. So
yeah, thank you very much for that, ladies and gentlemen.
Appreciate
it was really well received, and there are going to be more to come. So thank you very much. And we're going to kick right off with that game because I think me and you are quite proud of the analysis because it was pretty accurate.
Well,
yeah. Anyway, so it was Liverpool 2, Chelsea 1. Very, very interesting game, I'm going to say. I think I'm not sure. I thought it was quite even on the whole game. I think it was quite even. I think Chelsea had more of the lion's share of the possession.
Yep.
They had the highest passing accuracy at Anfield since 2004 in the Premier League, away at Anfield. So by any Premier League team in the past 20 years, no one's had a higher pass completion. And I think that kind of puts testament to how well Maresca set Chelsea up, but obviously they didn't win the game, so you could also put it down to how well Slot or how he set up in terms of
played
to allow
a little bit
them
into their hands.
I'm just going to go right from the top and say that what we covered with the box in the midfield on the tactics board is kind of what happened. Well, not kind of what happened, that's what happened. But then we also saw something different from Liverpool in terms of them not applying too much pressure on the ball. Obviously, for Chelsea to have the highest passing accuracy in the past 20 years at Anfield in the Premier League, there has to be some sort of element of Liverpool not pressing the ball as much for them to have that. So what did you make of Liverpool out of possession? Why did Liverpool not have as much as the ball as maybe people expected them to?
Yeah, I think we've seen it a little bit with Slot Liverpool throughout the season. We're very used to that sort of Klopp style of high pressure, pushing sort of on the last line. And we've seen that in that same 4-2-4 shape as we previewed. But I think what we've seen at times is to set up in more of this mid-block shape, entice the opposition onto them a little bit. And then when there is the ability to win the ball, then you break fast with your players like Diaz, with your players like Salah. And in sort of reducing those distances instead of trying to push as high, because we know, and we spoke about this before, the ability that Chelsea have in attacking the space in behind with your Palmers, with your Jacksons, etc., that's where they're almost most dangerous. We saw it with Wolves trying to engage in that sort of high pressing sort of style against Chelsea, and they conceded how many goals for it?
Do you know what I mean? Brighton game as well, there was a lot of counter-attacking goals.
Yeah, so in that sort of fashion, I think setting up in a mid-block doesn't invite too much pressure, where your home fans and your home crowd are going to be upset at how you're setting up, but you're also reducing some of that space in behind your own defence, and you're applying a little bit of pressure in sort of that middle third. So I think that probably explains some of the rationale from Slot.
Would you say it was more? Would you say it was a Maresca? The way Maresca set up, would you say it was good for Maresca, or would you say Slot kind of noticed that they were going to attack space in behind and kind of limited them of the space they could? So was it a good decision from Slot? I thought Chelsea were just like a few inches away here and there to having a proper goal scoring opportunity, and then I don't know whether or not I thought it was a good choice to do that from a Liverpool perspective, but ultimately they won the game. And they won the game in one instance by, all the big chances in the first half especially come from the transitions, which he set up to play for. So I think Maresca got a lot of flowers for yesterday. I think it's like the first time in a long time where a big team has gone away to a big ground and put in a performance that's not won them the game, but it's enough to kind of go to the fans, look, we're trying to do something. So I think Chelsea fans, it was obviously not, it's not good to get beat at Anfield, it's never good to lose a game, no matter who it's against, but I think Maresca does deserve a little bit of credit for how he set up and kind of the chances they generated. Obviously, he can't really account for the penalty mistake and the Robert Sanchez potential error on the second goal. But kind of moving away from Chelsea, I wanted to obviously praise Liverpool for how good they were, and they did win the game. I want you to touch on one player, and I'm going to touch on one.
Go on.
You can touch on the second goal scorer.
Fine.
Who is one of your favourite players, and to be fair, you have said it for years. So, go on. How good was Curtis Jones in this game?
Curtis Jones, I mean, I've spoken about Curtis Jones. When he first broke onto the scene, very much sort of a left-sided, almost a left-winger kind of player. He had that brilliant goal, I think, very early on. I think it was against Everton. Left side, curled it in. Brilliant, almost like a Coutinho-esque goal. But from what I've seen from Curtis Jones, following him through the England setup as well, he's a player who he displays like a completeness in his profile that not too many sort of English midfielders have. We've always had this conversation about who can pair Declan Rice in that midfield as our second pivot player. We've seen conversations include Mainu, we've seen Wharton, we've seen Gomez, for example. I've said for 2 or 3 years now that Curtis Jones suits that profile probably more than anyone, because to me he reminds me of, in his profile, Ilkay Gundogan. And that's not to say that they have similar quality, but to be that second pivot player to support in a defensive aspect your defensive midfielder well, he can do that. In the build-up, he's confident and comfortable in a 360-degree radius. He can receive back to goal. What he does really well is facilitate the rotations with the left winger. So he moves out into wide areas, and not every central midfielder or second pivot player can do that quite effectively. But Gundogan's done that. We've seen, Xhaka do that at times for Arsenal. But players who can rotate into those areas, Odegaard's done it, with Saka at times as well. So that ability to rotate, and then now he's adding that ability to crash the box, like an Ilkay Gundogan as well. So as that sort of second midfield player, shuttling and being really confident, technically secure, good height, physical, I think he has genuinely everything to play in there. And I think 2 or 3 years ago, when they were talking about the club midfield and sort of it moving on and potential solutions, I said it was necessary for Liverpool to get Curtis Jones and implement him, have him be a mainstay of the team, even in spite of signings like McAllister, etc. And we're seeing that now. Hopefully this performance from Curtis Jones is one that has brought in the trust of Arne Slot, and I'd really love him to establish that position. Because it'll be brilliant for England in general.
Yeah, so I'm a big fan of Curtis Jones anyway. I know there's a certain section of Liverpool fans that basically want him to play in the midfield, and I think under an Arne Slot, kind of the shot distribution that we mentioned, he's more like a ball player, kind of all angles, but obviously he does have that grit and that bit between his teeth where he can, and that's why Klopp's really liked him and why he got in the team. The player that I'm going to speak about is the guy who assisted Curtis Jones' goal and scored the first goal, because bloody hell, he's like...
Mention your tweet, by the way.
Oh, yeah. So if you don't know, I tweeted after the game that Mohamed Salah is the best Super Sunday player I've ever seen in the Premier League, which I actually stand by. Yeah. Like, every single time I turn on the TV on a Sunday 4:30, and to be fair, half the time it's been against my club, so I can't even make a joke about it. Yeah. But he is absolutely ridiculous. I've got a few stats that I want to basically spiel out to you, especially when it comes to the big six, because I think one of the things is with the players is, when they come through, there's always this debate, they could be better than Salah. And every time there's a right winger who pops up each season.
5 games,
and
6 games
in, and Salah just goes, nah, I'm having it. Yeah. And just shuts them down. Mohamed Salah is the first player in Premier League history to score a goal and provide an assist in 10 different games against the Big Six, which is just testament to how good he has been in terms of playing against the Big Six, in terms of showing up all the time. And I really don't like the aesthetics bias that people kind of put onto Salah in terms of he's not as good to watch as X player. Like, the sport is about goals, the sport is about efficiency, and fair enough if you want to watch it for enjoyment, but as a fan, you're not going to enjoy watching anything more apart from that player score the amount of goals that he does.
And I think it's a little bit harsh to say that, he's effective, but he's not got aesthetics to his game.
We all watch the assist.
Yeah, the creativity that he's certainly introduced more so into his game last year and a half, maybe. Sort of the Trivellas that he's playing, the in-swinging crosses that he's playing. I think one criticism that people have about Salah is probably explained in the fact that he doesn't necessarily dribble past players. What he's done, and I think is brilliant, is he has the ability to manufacture space and then play a pass or play a shot.
He likes that dribble across the top of the box, doesn't he? Where he doesn't actually go past the player, but he just goes side to side.
Yeah, next time you watch Salah, watch how often he runs past his man. Like a Doku, for example, he'll always go past his man. Salah very rarely does it. What he does is use his body to get space. And when we saw, Eden Hazard, he's the player that people most likely compare him to. But Eden Hazard was brilliant at weaving in and out, going past players. And I think that's what sometimes people are drawn to and excited by. But in Mo Salah's creativity and his execution, he doesn't necessarily dribble past players. But I don't think that's a problem. There's a different version of being aesthetically pleasing in his goals and in his passing.
Where would you, just to wrap up on this Liverpool versus Chelsea game, I think a lot of people are going to kind of take the current form that he's in under Arne Slot, and he's been absolutely brilliant under them, under Arne Slot. But where would you say that Mohamed Salah who would you put up against Mohamed Salah? Who is he in the debates with now? Because I think all time Premier League. Because I think last season some of the debates that he was still in were a bit like, oh right, is he still really in them debates?
He should be for best Premier League right winger.
That's what I think. Because I think obviously the debate is still about him and Salah, Eden Hazard and Salah.
Yeah.
But I think he can't look past what he's doing anymore and how long he's done it for, and the amount of goals and assists. The lowest goals and assists Mohamed Salah's got in a full Premier League season is 27. And he's been in the league for about 8 years now. Yeah, that's ridiculous. Yeah. That's not normal. No. But yeah, give Salah his flowers. I think he's absolutely unbelievable. He's a joy to watch. He's a joy to watch strike the ball, because bloody hell does he hit that hard. But we're going to move on from that. There's a lot of positives to take from a Maresca and a Chelsea standpoint, and Chelsea are still on kind of like a pathway to build something. But I was really impressed with them. But at the end of the day, like me and Umir say, if you've got that player quality and you've got that goals in the team, and you're always going to stand a chance of winning the game.
You got Trent, by the way, Trent brilliant. We should mention that briefly. Yeah. Van Dijk, Konate. That will always push you over the edge of two fairly well matched teams.
Okay, moving swiftly on to Bournemouth versus Arsenal, which was a bit of not the most surprise. Well, yeah, I think it was the most surprising game in terms of how it
results,
went. Yeah. Red cards since Boxing Day 2019. Obviously, Arsenal have now got 18. The second highest is Wolves and Everton joint on 13. Which is it a problem? Can you really count a 5 red card margin over 5 years as kind of an anomaly? It seems to be shaky, a bit worrying, concerning.
Yeah. Well, I think in the past, certainly, especially as that team was kind of growing and building in and coming into its own, there was almost that sort of emotional aspect of the team. It was a young team. You still had players like, I know this is a sort of a stereotype of Granit Xhaka's game, but he was almost stereotyped by referees and by pundits, fans, the like, as being aggressive. When you are trying to instill a team that duel well, and that's a very
good point.
Hallmark, very specific hallmark of the Arteta sort of game model. Perhaps if you become too aggressive and you're too front-footed, it's just a natural consequence of building a team that is great at duels, winning second balls, etc. So perhaps it's a result of that, but I think the benefits that you get outside of that are probably worthwhile.
Well, it's not just the incline in Arsenal's red cards since Boxing Day 2019. There were 5 red cards shown to players in the Premier League on Saturday, which was the most on a single day of the competition since the 29th of August 2015. So it's definitely, I think the threshold's kind of coming down for what can happen, what can be a red card. Obviously, we've got all the delay in the kick-off, and you can get a yellow card for doing pretty much anything nowadays, which is not really a problem. It's just the way the rules are going. So I don't think the red cards and booking numbers are going to come down. I think the booking numbers are only going to stay up. I think it was the most yellow cards in a game against Chelsea and Bournemouth in Premier League history and stuff like that. Yeah. So it's definitely going to be something that's only going to get worse, I think. Especially in the bigger games. As for Arsenal in this game, we did kind of talk briefly about this off camera, but Arsenal played 4 central defenders in the back line.
If you can call Calafiori
if you can call Calafiori centre half, which depends if you want.
Call him an attacking midfielder if you want.
And 3 defensive-ish midfielders. Yeah. When Bukayo Saka doesn't play in this Arsenal team, it does seem like they're missing that attacking edge. And I think one of the points that people always make is that they need the centre forward. I think me and you are both in the camp of maybe they do, but maybe they also don't, because Havertz does well as a centre forward. I think one thing that Arsenal need, and I'm not sure whether or not it was like a popular opinion in the summer off Arsenal fans, but they do need another wide threat. Yeah. Like they do need, even if it's a Saka rotation option, if it's someone who can rotate with Gabriel Martinelli or Jesus when he plays out wide or something like that. I do just think that Arsenal need, again, that cutting edge attacker. And I think when you look at something like, I know he's not really played much this season, but when you look at like Chiesa, who went to Liverpool for virtually nothing, you're looking at these kind of smart, neat signings in the market where you just go and get them, and it just gives you that little bit of edge in the European competition. Because I just feel like when Saka doesn't play, I feel like it's worse when Saka doesn't play in comparison to Ødegaard.
Yeah,
because
for sure.
Saka's now doing everything, it feels like.
For me, and I understand your point about Chiesa in this situation, but I think sometimes those like short fixes might not be the best option. I think with Arsenal, they've got a team that are like very brilliant in preventing opposition from getting chances, and they pen teams in consistently for large parts of the game. So then you're relying on your attackers and your attacking midfielders, for example, to come up with solutions to score. The game's mostly set up to impart pressure and then try and find a solution to score. Now, Saka's a brilliant footballer. He's going to find those solutions. Martinelli, at his best, can come inside and get goals, etc. But you need, I think, a player who 50, 60, 70, 80 million. Like a really...
Like a floor, like not a floor, like ceiling raiser.
Yeah, absolutely. Just somebody who... Because with Liverpool, we saw it at times under Klopp. I'm probably wrongly so, criticised them a little bit for not having patterns of play to unlock defences. I was always like, at maybe sort of 2017, saying, look, Liverpool, they keep scoring. It's the individual brilliance of Salah. It's the individual brilliance of Mane. But those are players that you should rely on because they can reliably overperform like situations where other players won't score in. So Hyun-Min Sung, for example. So if you get players in like that, of that quality, it takes away some of the need to systematically break down defences because it's difficult to do that in general. And if you've got so much of the ball, you've got a brilliant left winger in someone like Leao, for example. If he can create chances, create the opportunity to score for himself on that left side, take some of that burden off of Bukayo Saka on the right side, then you're looking at sort of a final form version of Arsenal, I think.
That's kind of what I was thinking. I think they do need a wide left threat. I think Gabriel Martinelli's obviously not really hit the heights. He's sort of done okay this season. He's come back into it. But I do think, not just for rotation, but for genuine just sheer quality when you go to these places, like you just need that extra touch of attacking quality. And I feel like obviously it's an anomaly.
By the way, a Rashford would be
like a Rashford. Well, they have got Sterling.
Yeah, but I think he's sort of coming back into it.
I think he may provide that. I think he might do that. But obviously it's taken him time to get up to it. And we're not going to criticise Arsenal too much because this is the first game they've lost in however many months. It's like 7 months since the last loss in the Prem. So I'm not really going to go in on Arsenal too much. But I will praise the Cherries.
The set pieces. Because
the set piece, Sean Cooper, who Ryan Christie give basically the credits to, is the attacking set piece coordinator for Bournemouth, said that the set piece was straight off the training ground, which is lovely to see and to hear, and it was a beautiful set piece routine. And
I looked at it a little bit, so I'll just speak about what I noticed. And
I have got something about this as well. So you might actually
should we see if it lines up?
So go on,
you go first.
They had 3 blockers on the 6-yard box. So they had Justin Kluivert. So they had Justin Kluivert at the front post, who basically pulled wide to receive the cutback.
Yeah.
And then I think they had the 3 biggest players in the box kind of pin Arsenal's 6-yard box in. And then Ryan Christie arrived, and then he shot high because it was going over the players.
So it's interesting because you focused on what Bournemouth did in that cluster.
Oh, have you got Arsenal?
Yeah.
Oh, right, okay, interesting.
Well, it's like we planned it. We did it.
Great.
So after Arsenal got the red card, so the way that Arsenal typically set up from corner situations is they have 2 players on the front of the 6-yard box marking zonally. Then they have sort of a cluster of 6 that are around the edge of the 6-yard area that pick up players man to man. And then they'll usually have 3 sort of edge of the area picking up players man to man as well. So in getting a red card, they're 1 player short. They've still got the 2 zonally. And then obviously now that I'm piecing it together with what you've said, with that sort of zonal marking and then the man-to-man pressure of the other 6 being sort of all penned into that 6-yard area, the 3 man's actually on the edge of the area because they're 1 man short. So in moving, that sort of movement front post that they do, the player doesn't necessarily follow him immediately because he's zonal marking. And then that flick he passes goes to the scorer who's
not
free
being marked,
because they're 1 player short.
It'd be interesting to see if the Bournemouth coaches went into the dressing room after they got the red card, and the set piece coach went, "Let's try this because I think if he's free."
It looked different.
Because I think they actually went into the dressing room and went, "We can get a man advantage that creates a dead cert.
Yeah, your
chance.
free man's.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's really good. Obviously, Arsenal have been famous for taking these marginal gains and these variances, we say it in these games. But I think Bournemouth doing what they did was just brilliant. Brilliant in game thinking. He got a lot of love on a touchline. I've seen all the coaches running over, so it's always nice when you see that. I love that, man. It's like one of the most underrated things in football. It's like seeing just a random coach just like go like that because he knows he's done it.
Yeah, over 90 minutes, the 3 points in the season, it's him. It's that one
that's
guy.
like Nicolas Jover obviously is like the king of it.
Now,
But like they've got a few lads at United. I think we scored from like a high pressing moment against Brentford, and Rennie Hacker was on the sideline, and I think he's supposed to be like kind of like the defensive pressing guy with Van Nistelrooy, and Ten Hag kind of turned around to him and was like, this is so nice.
Yeah, my favourite thing.
But also again in this game, Semenyo was absolutely brilliant. He got into the right space. He should have scored a goal, but just getting better and better each week. We do talk about him quite a lot, so I'm not going to say too much about him. Moving on to probably the most controversial game out of runs in the club, innit? Wolves Manchester City ended 2-1 to the Sky Blues. I've got the funniest stat on the top of this. City had the same amount of shots as Wolves did possession.
What?
22-22.
That's brilliant. That's really good, yeah.
I went on the stats.
By the way, your stat lines are like comedy one-liners. They're like punchlines.
Look, it's just City shots 22, Wolves possession 22. But that would kind of a testament of the entire game. Basically, the way to describe it, if you didn't watch it, was imagine 11 players being on the edge of your box passing the ball around for the entire game.
Which is almost like the pattern of Manchester City's season a little bit.
It is true. I didn't think this player had the strongest game, but we do like him. But Rico Lewis is the first teenager to start 25 league matches under Pep Guardiola in his top-flight managerial career, which is brilliant. Obviously, he's been relied upon a lot this season already. And,
but I think it makes sense to play him in there, to be honest. Yeah,
for sure. I think one thing we are going to speak about how eventually City was so good to break the block and to be really good. But I saw a lot of kind of the stuff that we've spoke about in terms of the vulnerability. I guess you could sort of say.
I mean, there's a big weakness in Manchester City's game.
So I think City have now conceded the first goal in 4 of their 8 Premier League games this season, all of which they have won, which is just testament to the champion spirit and all that. Oh, garbage. I can't believe I just said that. Honestly. But, no, it is testament to how good they are at coming back from kind of setbacks. They've been doing it. You've kind of done it for like the past 10 years.
It's almost become like our culture almost since the Aguero moment, I would say.
Yeah, I actually said quite a few years ago, I think I actually might have said it on a podcast to you, but it feels like it wasn't just the Etihad, but it felt like when City kind of got their first titles, the Etihad, because of how good you were, you never really lost there. And you took that away from home, and it was only Anfield that was like the edge where you couldn't really win there. But Etihad, it just seemed like you never lost and never even had a setback.
Yeah,
we are going to touch on one player he's just an absolute unicorn. Since Gvardiol's debut in August of 2023, no defender has scored more goals in the Premier League than him, which is absolutely ridiculous. He scored 6 goals.
I think they're almost exclusively on his weak foot as well.
All from outside the box, it feels like, except for the Newcastle one, which was probably harder than the other ones where he just like kind of dribbles through. I was always kind of a big fan of Josko Gvardiol. At Leipzig, it did feel like a bit of a grey area because he was a wide centre-half and then no one knew if he could play left-back or left centre-half in a 4. And obviously City just come around and give him the most perfect role ever, which is kind of like a box-crashing, wide left centre-half who can also play left-back. And
the space for Manchester City for years has been in where the full-backs are. And previously we've had players like popping up in those positions who aren't necessarily suited to those roles. Like they've always been positions where you'd always want a midfielder or attacker, but because of the way that the team's been set up, they would arrive in those areas under the least pressure because teams were sat so deep. So to get a guy who can defend left back well, who's physical in the air, and who when he is in those areas, and when he is in those areas, he can basically do what an attacking midfielder would do.
He's almost like I think you paid 100 million euros.
Yeah, but I think it's worth it. At the time, I was like,
that's what I'm saying. You paid 100 million euros, and you know when a player is good when you sign him for that amount of money and
no one talks
actually,
about it,
no one even questions it.
Yeah.
And he is,
and he's a defender.
Yeah, he is just crazy. Like, I don't think there's like a weak facet. I remember I watched him in the World Cup when Argentina won it, and Croatia played Argentina, and he got ripped apart by Lionel Messi.
Which is,
I know, shocking by the way. Can't believe he's letting that happen. But he got ripped down a byline, and I remember I actually tweeted like, "This is going to be a big learning curve for him."
Yeah.
I was like, I actually think he's going to come back from this, and he's going to be so much better out wide. Because if you get like
and even when he got
roasted
done,
by him,
he still sort of came back and not recovered entirely, but he tracked him all the way back into his own box.
Yeah, he still did pretty well. It was literally just a matter of kind of like an inch and Messi and just being Messi and stuff. But I always felt like he was going to go to like a big European club, and I was like, I don't know why, but I think I always pitched him like a Chelsea.
Yeah.
I don't know why, like under a free back manager, but obviously City seems to be where he is, and he's absolutely brilliant.
Yeah.
Technical, physical. He's these players that we're talking about now when managers need to, expand their tactical knowledge and their framework, and they want to drop someone into a system which just kind of makes it explode.
Yeah.
These are the type of players we're talking about. Players who just have unmatched both physical, technical, and even mental.
Problem solving.
Everything. Like, and I just think he is a Manchester City player in terms of like everything he does, the way City have kind of adapted going forward. I think he's unbelievable. I think he's been probably one of the best defenders this season.
Yeah.
From when I've actually watched him just defending, not even just the goals, which is obviously stupid because he's scoring goals. But absolutely brilliant. Brilliant player. And this is another thing just to put on to how kind of kill them by 1,000 passes that City was. City completed 539 passes in Wolves, is half the most by any opposition team in a half of a Premier League match this season, and City's third most in an away game from 03-04.
Wow.
So in terms of kind of the way City play, this is probably like the third greatest game for Pep Guardiola in terms of what he was looking at and going.
I think for as good as sort of the stats look in the second half, that there was certainly
they did limit you to virtually nothing.
So some people were talking about sort of Gary O'Neill's setup being really impressive. I think the 5-4-1, how it blocked the central areas, was good, and we've seen this against when teams play City, when teams play Arsenal. It's about sort of getting out and putting pressure on that second line, the players in front, which is what they lacked. And then on top of that, I suppose the other compliment that people are giving Wolves is the ability to break. The goal that they scored, I thought, was actually really impressive. But I think Manchester City lacked the ability to have legs in there to track back. And when Mateus Nunes came on at the end, just before we did win that corner,
well, he made that run. He made that like 60-yard run back. Won the ball, and it's like, I've always said this about City. I've said this about City since the Brentford game, and it's not like a massive criticism of City. I'm not saying that they're bad or they're awful, but they just lack that little physical edge that a player, like Rodri brings, not just because he can actually move across the floor, but he can get into people and stuff. And I think Nunes kind of has them legs, so I wouldn't be surprised to see him.
Like now, I feel like it's almost a necessity to either get him in the team or to get your centre backs into the midfield areas.
Just so he can have the legs.
Just a bit of that, So in that sense, I thought that was something that City struggled with again. Kovacic brilliant on the ball, but off the ball, just a little bit shaky. Covering space.
It's just going to be interesting. It's so funny because like out of everything that a Manchester City team do and a Pep Guardiola team, that everyone always says like, oh, they're vulnerable to transitions, and it's like, well, obviously, like they're always going to be, but it feels a bit heightened. It feels a bit heightened
with Rodri in the team. Kanji in the team, Nathan Ake in the team.
Well, I actually thought that Akanji and Ake probably should. I think Akanji and Ake should probably start the games with more transitional teams. That's why I don't know. I think Wolves did a really good job of obviously cancelling out Haaland. He had no shots in the entire game. He accumulated no expected goals. There was nothing. I think it's only the third game for Manchester City that he's actually accumulated no expected goals, which is...
That's the reason why there's space on the edge.
Well, that's what I'm saying. So I feel like if you focus on Haaland too much, it opens up pockets of opportunity for other players and just for other spaces.
Arsenal got out really well. They sat really deep, but they put pressure on
the ball. And that's kind of the one thing, obviously, like Gary O'Neill set them up to... Well, they almost got something out of the game, but I feel like it is a way where you do have to just kind of count. You have to be lucky to win them games, and it is tough, especially from where Wolves were and what they were trying to do and how they're trying to adapt and stuff. We are going to touch on 2 games just very, very briefly, just because it would be a shame to miss them. Spurs 4, West Ham 1.
Yep.
We spoke about how West Ham last week, we spoke about how they really need to do something in this game. And I thought in the first half, they were actually doing well to kind of release their attacking players on the break.
I thought they won the duels in the midfield third well, particularly in the beginning.
Yeah, I think people are... I'm a massive fan of Ange Postecoglou. I feel like I have something to say on him every week, man.
Yeah.
I don't know
why. Rightly so, to be honest.
Yeah, but he made a brilliant tactical shift in that game. If you don't know, West Ham were basically dominating the midfield. I think they had Paqueta, Souček and Alvarez.
I think so. Souček jumps out in my mind.
Souček was definitely there, and Paqueta definitely played. I just don't know who the other midfielder was. But basically, they were losing the midfield battle, and Spurs went for the split eights of Kulusevski and Maddison, with just Basuma behind. And in the
Maddison,
first
by
half,
the way, I think he had the most chances created. And
oh, really?
Yeah, stats-wise, he was very impressive, which makes the decision
makes it even more kind of...
Yeah, high risk, but very well-founded and really impressive from Ange.
Yeah, so he subbed on Mohamed Salah in place of James Maddison, who had a really good first half, but he just provided the legs and steel into the midfield. And in the first half, it did actually feel like they were missing the legs, and it was a huge decision to make. But it worked.
I was just going to say, on top of that, the ability for the 2 central midfielders in the second half to go into the wide areas and defend meant that the centre-backs actually didn't have to go out into those areas, which is what we saw in the first half. So, people talk about Ange Postecoglou's rest defence, for example, and ability to defend counter-attacking situations, but that tweak actually helped both the centre-backs not only sort of winning, not only Spurs winning the duels in the midfield, but also, tracking back and covering those wide areas so the centre-backs could stay.
Yeah, and I think everyone always goes, Ange, heavy metal and stuff, but that was a defensive change.
Really impressive.
He made the defensive change and they ended up scoring more goals.
Yeah.
So, no, brilliant. There was one player in this game that I just thought was absolutely unbelievable, and Dejan Kulusevski, man.
I remember my De Bruyne shout.
I was seeing it.
Yeah.
He was running with the ball in the middle, and I think he's kind of been one of them players under Ange Postecoglou. Now he's come inside and he's playing much more as a central midfielder.
Yeah.
He has been incredible. I watched him in the first half against Brighton. I thought he was unbelievable, and then he did the interview after the game on West Ham. I think he speaks so brilliantly, and you can tell the players have really bought into what he's doing. But I think Dejan Kulusevski is just absolutely brilliant. I don't know what it is, man. He seems so bulky.
But that's what I was going to say. It's very I hate to make the comparison, but it's very De Bruyne in sort of his frame.
Big shoulders.
Pushes off players where he carries it. The release on his pass whilst carrying the ball. Obviously, left-footed on that side, but really impressive. And I've said I wanted to see him in right centre mid for God knows since 2022, 2021.
Well, it seems to be working. Whatever Ange Postecoglou has done, obviously with him, because I think the goal was taken really well. I think obviously Areola should probably have done better for the goal, but his general play, it's just so good.
He actually said, I think there's an old interview quote where the club, I think one of his youth clubs or one of his first clubs ever, he used to actually play in midfield.
Yeah.
Then he moved out to the wing. And then he said he'd fashioned some of his game, or he was inspired partly by De Bruyne and the fact that he'd played in midfield before. That's when sort of that comparison popped into my head. But the quality that he has is founded in some of his past experiences, and I think it's always nice to look back on players and where they've played and where they value their own skills in terms of positions on the pitch. So
brilliant win for Spurs. Obviously needed that after the capitulation at Brighton, and obviously a 4-1 win. They've now had the most Premier League home wins after conceding first since the start of last season. They've got double the amount of the second place teams. They've got 8 and the second place team has got 4. So it really just kind of shows the kind of thing about them being the most entertaining team, I always say. But now they've come back 8 times from losing positions to win the game since the start of last season, and they are heavy metal, they are heavy goal scorers. And I described Spurs on Twitter as a heavy hitting boxer with a glass chin.
Yeah,
Amir Khan, people were saying. But Amir Khan, but I reckon probably more like an Anthony Joshua.
Like a heavyweight,
like a big one who can really knock something into you kind of thing. But I think it is the best thing that I could basically use to describe him, and I do think that the physical levels will come into it. And
they're showing it up a little bit. I wonder if they pursue with
Pepe Matasar in there.
Yeah.
We'll see. But moving on to the last game of the episode, we have Manchester United versus Brentford, which was actually a win for my football club.
Wow.
So yeah, we can finally.
So let's wrap up the episode.
We can wrap it up now actually, because no, some good tactical tweaks in there from Eric Ten Hag.
I really liked it.
Yeah, people are quick to bash him, and obviously like on here we've spoke about the criticisms and stuff like that. I think Eric Ten Hag got this game spot on, if I'm being really honest. He used the back line of Martinez, Johnny Evans, Matthias de Ligt and Diogo Dalot. Played Garnacho off the left and Rashford off the right. And on paper, it doesn't really look like the dynamics work well.
But yeah, I went through him.
It
does make sense.
What he did on the ball was really good. So pushed Garnacho
high and wide, right footer on that side.
Tucked in Rashford a little bit inside, which he has good creation, good crossing from, as we've seen from the goal. Let Dalot go all the way up and shift the back three, and you've got Martinez, Evans and De Ligt. And it worked, and I think the second
Casemiro,
half...
we've mentioned before, this season he's looked better the higher up he is anyway. And he's pinned players. Højlund's dropped in. And then you get Garnacho 1v1 against his man as well, so...
Yeah. No, it was really good from Eric Ten Hag. I think it's probably the best half of football. The second half against Brentford, it was probably the best half of football that Manchester United have played this season. They've got a massive game on Thursday against Fenerbahce away, which can quickly change the tide in terms of how the narrative is, obviously. But I think people are really quick to jump on the manager, but I thought in this game we played quite well and we were really intense, and that's the thing that just irks me about this team, is that you can see that the physical levels are there, and you can see that Eric Ten Hag's clearly got a say on the dressing room that's big enough to make the players kick into gear when they're 1-0 down. It's clear that the players aren't just rolling over and aren't just letting things happen on the pitch. They want to win for this manager. They want to come from behind. And yeah, it just really irks me that Manchester United have to go 1-0 down and have to get a shake-up. And I know it happens to teams, but this has happened quite a lot. And when you see a team that's capable of delivering that performance, it's just like, why can you not do that more consistently? I'm not asking every week, just asking for a bit of consistency. And then the final point from this Manchester United game is probably one of the best games I've seen from Rasmus Højlund.
Really nice, From a profile perspective, I think I've seen it spoken about, and I've noticed it myself, to be honest. The way he shoots from the left-hand side, he's miles better in getting separation, getting a shot away and scoring from that side than he is on the right-hand side. So by actually moving Rashford inside and having him occupy that lane...
A little bit to lean to the left.
Yeah, you've got a sort of left-leaning Højlund who's far more impressive. And the fact that he dropped deep, rolled his man on the numerous occasions.
That's one thing you said. A lot of Manchester United fans have criticised his hold-up play because he wants to wrestle with the defender, and it's obviously something that I've said as well. He should be creating separation. He's quick enough, he's physical enough to ride the contact. He should be getting away from his man, then running. But he did say in the press conference after the game, his interview, he did say, I was looking to not wrestle the centre-half as much, and he was looking to create separation. And I'm happy that he's learning, because it's obviously a criticism that people have given him. He took his goal brilliantly, lovely pass from Bruno Fernandes, and he's really developing into something nice, and I've always been a big fan of him. I've never looked past him being anything but Manchester United's number 9, and I think he will become something really, really special. Thank you for watching this episode of the Overlap Breakdown podcast. Please like, comment and subscribe if you enjoyed, and give us a 5-star rating on all podcast streaming platforms. And given the recent success with our video on previewing Liverpool versus Chelsea, we'll be bringing you a special Arsenal versus Liverpool preview for this weekend's fixtures. And we'll be back again next week to cover it all right on here.